Hi folks, in this video I'm going to be going through the criticisms of a Marxist perspective on crime. If you haven't already, watch my video on a Marxist view of crime. It goes through all the main points covering a Marxist view of crime. The link's in the description below. In this video I'm going to give you 4 criticisms you can make of a Marxist view of crime. Tom from thesociologytutor.com here. Check out my channel and subscribe if you want more sociology tutorial videos. Let's get started. The first criticism we can make of Marxism is that it's too deterministic. What I mean by that is that it assumes people are puppets on the string, that they're passive, that they're strongly shaped by the social structure in society. So for example, Marxism argues that capitalism is crimogenic, that it breeds crime, it creates crime by its very nature. For example, they would argue that advertising and the media turn us into materialist consumers, where we define our identity through what we buy, and we're encouraged to want and aspire to ever-increasing levels of wealth. And when we can't achieve that through legitimate means, we turn to crime. The problem with this theory is, firstly, it takes away the role of the individual. It takes away the role of the individual in making a choice to commit crime or not. It assumes that we are simply moulded and shaped by our experience. And secondly, it can't explain why only some people turn to crime, particularly people in the working classes. Marxist theory of crime says the conditions create inequality and poverty. Capitalism creates those conditions, and then people will turn to crime out of frustration, anger. The problem with the Marxist theory of crime is it can't explain why only some people turn to crime and others don't. So like all structural theories, Marxism takes a top-down view of society, and it uses the social structure to explain people's actions. Other theories, such as interactionists, would argue people are active. We actively construct our identities. We're not simply shaped by the social structure. We're not passive, just absorbing ideas from society and then acting them out. The second criticism we can make of a Marxist view of crime is that the legal system doesn't always work in the interests of the ruling class. There are a number of cases where the legal system has punished members of the ruling class, for example, sending politicians to prison or sending business people to prison for breaking the rules. A Marxist theory of crime argues the legal system and the laws work in the interests of the ruling class. They're designed by them and they benefit from them. However, we can see these examples where this is not the case. A Marxist would respond by saying the reason this happens, the reason a handful of people from the ruling class committing crime are sent to prison, is to legitimate the system as a whole. What I mean by legitimate is to justify it. By sending the odd few members of the ruling class to prison, it kind of gives the impression that we're all being judged by the same standards. Marxists would argue those are only a handful of the members of the ruling class committing crimes, and that their crimes are more harmful. And by sending the odd person to prison, it maintains the legitimacy of the system as a whole. Furthermore, consensus theories would argue the legal system actually reflects a broad moral consensus in society, that the majority of people in society approve of the majority of the laws. They reflects a value consensus amongst the general public, and people approve of the laws being policed. You don't need me to list a whole load of laws that the majority of people will probably agree with. So we can argue against this idea to some degree, that the legal system is just there to benefit the ruling class and it only works in their interests. The third criticism isn't really a criticism, it's more a piece of evidence that a Marxist theory of crime would struggle to explain. In the UK, crime has been falling since 1992. In that time, the UK has become a more unequal country, and the benefits that are paid to people on low incomes and welfare support has also been cut. Remember, Marxists argue capitalism is crimogenic, that it breeds crime, it creates inequality, it creates poverty, and then this leads to crime in lots of ways. However, in the UK, despite the fact the conditions have got more severe, and we would expect more crime, the crime rate has actually been falling. There's been a very recent increase in some violent crimes, but overall, there's quite a remarkable drop in the crime rate. It's similar in America, and the Marxist theory just can't explain these, because all of the conditions that make capitalism more crimogenic exist, and they exist in a more severe way yet crime has been going down in the UK. The fourth criticism we can make of a Marxist view of crime is that not all capitalist societies have high crime rates. Japan, Denmark, a number of countries in Europe which are capitalist have much lower crime rates than the US, for example. One of the problems of talking about capitalism is there are a number of different types of capitalism that exist, and some countries are more capitalist than others. There's more inequality and there's less support for those on lower income. So it creates the conditions which Marx said would lead to crime. From a Marxist perspective, the capitalist countries with the lowest crime rate only have those because they have a very generous welfare state, and that is what prevents the high levels of inequality which would exist otherwise. Nonetheless, they are still capitalist countries, so it's hard to say that this is not a valid criticism of a Marxist perspective on crime.